to the Talk of Simsbury. My name is Dominique Avery. There were two different inspirations for today's show. As the co-chair of the Simsbury Tourism Committee, I've long known that we have an airport here in town. It's an extraordinary asset, but one which many people here know nothing about. So I've been wanting to do a show about the airport and its very popular annual fly-in, which takes place in September. But what finally pushed me to do the show now was the tragedy of the Germanwings plane crash in the French Alps last month, where the pilot deliberately crashed the plane, killing everyone on board. The news that he had trained at a flight school in Arizona and had joined a flying club as a teen with a dream of learning to fly brought me back to our Simsbury Airport, which has a flying club, probably very similar to the club that the German pilot belonged to. So I don't really want to have a discussion about the air crash, but I do want to discuss all kinds of things about the airport, the fly-in, and learning to fly. And I'd like to introduce my guests now. Welcome, Brad Griswold.
Pleasure to be with you.
You are the president of the Flying Club and the Simsbury Airport manager.
That is correct.
And that's your volunteer job?
It is. We're all, everyone who takes a role in helping run the airport is completely a volunteer. There are no paid employees who run the airport there.
And Leo LeBeuf is here, and you are an independent flight instructor with
Future Flyers of Connecticut. Right.
So welcome to you both. Thank you so much for coming to talk about the airport and flying and learning to fly. I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting discussion. But Brad, so let me talk with you about the airport first. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know it's here. Where is it?
We like to think of a little bit of a hidden gem. It's a little bit too hidden as far as we're concerned. It's right off of Wolcott Road. There's an industrial park nearby. So, when you take off from Bradley and you see all those beautiful fields, those growing all sorts of herbs and trees and everything else, well, tucked right in there is Simsbury Airport. It's a small airport. It's probably on about 60 or 70 acres or so. We've got a 2,000-foot runway, and we're open to public. It's actually privately owned. We don't own it. We operate it though. But anyone who's got a plane that can land there is more than welcome to come on in and land. There's no landing fees or anything like that. And the most interesting part of it all is because it's privately owned and publicly run, there's no cost at all to the town of Simsbury, state of Connecticut, federal, at all. We've never received any government money whatsoever.
So what will people see? I took some pictures which it's going to
Mm-hmm.
run at the beginning of this show. Mm-hmm. It's a very simple airport. Can people come visit, and what will they see? And
Absolutely. We're actually right off the bike trail there. So if you're going out for a day, there's some great restaurants around the area. I know there's like a Peppermill Bakery. There's a lot of great restaurants by the International Skating Center around that area. So if you're biking in the area, we're just about 0.47 miles off the biking trail. Swing on by. We have a public picnic area there with picnic tables set up for everyone. They can come by. They can watch planes take off and land. It's very peaceful, very serene. If you're just looking to go to relax during lunch hour, we invite everyone to come out to sit out at the picnic tables and enjoy the day. We want people to come, and enjoy the airport. It's a great open space too.
so now you do one major event every year called the Simsbury Fly-In and Car Show. What is that? And I know a lot of people haven't been there. What do they see? What happens?
Oh my goodness, that's a little question for such a big answer. It is the largest event of its kind in New England. It takes what would be called a fly-in. It's not an air show, but think of it as a car show for airplanes. So we get about 130 aircraft in of all shapes, sizes, types, vintages, everything you can imagine. And then we combine that with a good old-fashioned car show too. So we'll get 450 to 550 classic cars, new model Ferraris, Lamborghinis, classic cars, everything you can imagine. Combine that with some great fair food, a bunch of great local vendors, and some national vendors as well. We get about 12 to 14,000 people coming in over the course of a one-day event. And this year, it is September 20th.
Sunday? It's a Sunday?
It is Sunday, September 20th from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m.
So I know the cars drive there. How
Yep.
do the planes get there?
Well, there's a few that come in beforehand. We actually had a couple people come in last year, and they flew in a day or two beforehand, and they actually set up a tent underneath the wing of their plane. That was kind of cool to have them come in early. But all of the planes come in on the day of the event. So if you get there early in the day, and I totally recommend that you do, get there 8 a.m. You get a great spot along the fence line. Just you can get a better view down the runway than you can at any air show or any other airport, and you see just the planes just coming in, just lining up and landing one after another, and that happens that way for just 3 hours straight. I mean, if you have a kid, who goes to an airport and they just, love watching that one plane land, imagine, 100 airplanes later, the look on their face.
I actually volunteered 1 year and spent quite a few hours there, and I was blown away by how interesting it was and what there was to see, and definitely worth seeing. The only problem I found at all was the parking issue, because there's not enough parking there, and it's hard to get there.
It's a challenge for us too. If you've ever been to the Simsbury airport, and then imagine 12 to 13,000 people over the course of the day, and then you have to imagine the traffic in or out on a 2-lane road. We really have to give a lot of credit to both the Simsbury Police Department and the Granby Police Department. Without them, we couldn't make it possible. They do a fabulous job getting the traffic in and out. We've explored some other ways of trying to get people in and out without causing a bigger problem than a solution, as it were, and we're still working on that one. But definitely, with the size of the event, we're always trying to find a better way to make people's day even better.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. I want to move on, Leo. I don't want to leave you out here. I wanted to talk a little bit about learning to fly with both of you, but let me start with you. What is Future Flyers of Connecticut?
Future Flyers of Connecticut is a flight school. We do basic flight instruction and instrument flight instruction. We have 2 aircraft right now in our fleet, and we also have an electronic simulator. We take our students basically from coming in off the street up through their private and instrument ratings. We've had quite a few of the students from, I think about a dozen students from Simsbury High School have come over and gotten their pilot's license. And by doing it at Future Flyers of Connecticut, what happens is when they go on to an aviation career or an aviation college, they're about a year ahead of their peers because they've already got their private pilot's license. And from that, then they're a year ahead, so in their 4th year, they end up as licensed FAA flight instructors, and they can actually start teaching and making some money at it.
Can anyone learn to fly?
If you can walk and chew gum, you can learn to fly an airplane.
You have to like going up there. I could not learn to fly, I can tell you that.
Well, it's surprising. A lot of people think that they could never do it, or they have fear of height or other things, but once they try it, it's such a great experience that they seem to succumb to the bug. I know Brad learned there at Simsbury Airport and through Future Flyers.
I went through Future Flyers, yep.
Yep, and so he's testament to what happens when the bug bites you.
Yes.
So let's talk about this bug. I mean, we touched on this young pilot who did this awful thing,
right,
who had a dream of learning to fly. I mean, I guess there are some kids, not talking about him, but who really want to fly. My son-in-law was like that. He wanted to, from the time he was tiny. How old do you have to be to learn? And what does that feel like to want to fly? You got to explain it to me. I don't get it.
Well, I got bitten by the bug. I guess I was probably 5 or 6 years old. My dad used to take us to the Lawrence, Mass. Airport where we grew up, and we'd watch the airplanes come and go. We'd also have an ice cream. It was kind of a little outing after supper with Dad. And from that time on, I decided I wanted to learn to fly. What does it take? Well, it takes money. It takes dedication. The Federal Aviation Administration basically regulates it quite a bit. And their requirement is that you have to have 40 hours of flight time to qualify to take the test for your private pilot's license. Future Flyers of Connecticut, we do that. People come in, we have financing available. Most people take about a year, but you can do it quicker, you can do it longer, depending on your schedule.
The interesting thing is, you were mentioning how young. There is no lower age limit to start to learn how to fly. When you turn 16 years old, if you've been signed off by your instructor, you can solo the airplane. You can take the airplane out by yourself. But I've known children as young as 10, 11, 12. Right. They can get what's called dual instruction. So with a qualified flight instructor like Leo, they can go up and take flight lessons. And truthfully, I've known some younger kids who have actually gone up and taken so many flight lessons that they're better than some older people at that point too. They get quite good. So quite practically in Connecticut, some could get their pilot's license before they even get their driver's license because they've just taken that much training.
Well, I guess there's not a lot of traffic up in the air with the small planes.
It's a big sky and a little airplane.
Right.
We're blessed and cursed to have Bradley next to us, and the curse isn't much. We're blessed because it's great for our students. At Future Flyers, we not only fly out of Simsbury, but we use the area airports, including Bradley. So our students get the advantage of the time and the friendliness of a small airport, but yet we have Bradley right next to us, so we can use their air traffic control tower. I take all my students into Bradley for a couple of times, especially at night. It's really quite the scene with all the lighting and everything. And the air traffic control folks are just so helpful to us.
Absolutely top notch.
Yeah, they are. They are.
So where do most pilots now learn to fly, and how does that happen? I know it used to be the military. But.
Right. At one time, the military was a great source, but the military is declining the number of pilots that they need because airplanes do more things. So the ways you can do it is people go to an aviation college or an aviation school, or you can go to a private provider such as Future Flyers of Connecticut. When you go to an aviation school, it is very expensive, but you get a good education.
And it's like a college education.
It's a college, right? You get most of the now you get a bachelor's degree in aviation management or similar field. When people want to go to the airlines, most of the airlines require that you have at least a bachelor's degree. People that want to stay local, that aren't going to school or have started working and then decided maybe I'd like to fly. I have a friend that has done that. Then they come to a flight school such as Future Flyers of Connecticut, and they start their training there. And we start them off with their private pilot, and then they can work up to their instrument pilot, and eventually they go to their commercial pilot, and finally the pinnacle is your ATP, or airline transport rating, for a pilot.
Now, the pilots who fly the airliners, we talked a lot about this German pilot and how he had 600 hours, and that he must have had more than 600 hours somewhere else.
No.
Only 600 hours
Yes.
flying, period?
Europe is quite a bit different than the United States. The United States requires 1,500 hours to be in the right seat of the airplane. In Europe, they're taking them with their programs where they're putting them in the right seat with as low as 250 hours. In the United States, your progression is you can become a flight instructor and then teach at a flight school such as Future Flyers, or you can get jobs towing banners, flying cargo, flying what they call charter, in the charter world. So that's the way people progress up. But until you have those 1,500 hours, you're not looking at an airline. And then with 1,500 hours, you only qualify usually for the regional airlines, the United Expresses and American Eagle and those type.
So we require many more hours than...
We do.
So
yes. As a matter of fact, a lot of pilots come to the U.S. to get their U.S. certificates because worldwide they're considered kind of the thing to have. I used to fly in a club in Colorado, and we had quite a few people come over from Great Britain. And they would spend a year living in Colorado, waiting tables, doing all kinds of menial tasks, and get their ratings, and then go back to Europe and try and get airline type of jobs.
So I understand I have a son-in-law who's a pilot,
Right.
and I know that he gets retrained. He has to go through retraining.
Right.
So that, I often wondered, how do they keep up with things? And they
Right.
in a simulator or stuff, he gets
Right.
put through these exercises. Can you tell me a little bit about how that works and why?
Right. Well, at the airline level, the training is very formalized. Airlines are far more regulated than we the private pilots, or they're known as the general aviation pilots. In the airlines, they have a training program. They have these full motion simulators, and you really can't tell that you're not in a simulator.
Right.
We have a simulator, but it's more of desktop computer. But it's still people. I watch their heart rates, their pulses go up. They get dry mouth, right, Brad?
Yeah,
You've been there and done that.
Yep.
So we are required every 2 years to have a flight review with a flight instructor. Flight instructors are required every 2 years to not only have the flight review, but we also have to go through an FAA-approved flight instructor refresher course. So that's the way we get our recurrent training. And then some of us, like at Future Flyers, most of us are doing recurrent training constantly.
So do you fly regularly, or are you so busy with your job and your airport stuff?
For anyone who loves flying, the answer is always, I never fly nearly as much as I would like to. So, with the winter we had, didn't get a chance to fly too much, but this summer with it getting a little bit warmer, you be assured that we'll be getting up in the air again. I'll probably take some refreshers with Future Flyers just to get current again and everything. Really, once the bug bites you, you just go. Going back to one of the things you had mentioned before,
Sure.
I thought it was an interesting point, because you used to say that, a lot of the pilots used to come from people in the military.
Right.
Now it's almost the other way around. I've known several people who have actually gone through private flight instruction before going into one of the service academies or going into the Air Force.
Right.
Because that gives them that leg up when they're going to, go for that pilot seat. If it's, start training someone who's already, a year or two along versus someone who's just, sort of coming off the street, it gives you a huge advantage. So it's kind of, some of the best pilots in the military have now trained privately before they've even gotten to the military.
Yeah, and I think from what I recall of my son-in-law's background, he also learned to fly long before he went to college
Yes.
to get a
Yep.
degree.
Yes.
So, he was passionate about it.
Well, just this last summer, we had 4 Simsbury High School students that got their private pilot's license before they went off to school. And one gentleman, I think it was like 1 or 2 days before he was leaving for college, that he took his check ride. And at Future Flyers, we're real fortunate. We have an FAA designated pilot examiner that's right based on the field. So that helped him, that he didn't have to go someplace. He was able to make the arrangements. But he came really close. But then when he went down there, I've heard back from him. When they come home for vacation, it's funny, they come over and rent an airplane and take their friends for a ride, go down to Block or something like that. And they're really ahead of their peers. They really are. Plus, it takes some of that first year, study load that you have. It kind of reduces that a lot, because you're that much further ahead of the learning curve.
It's one of the things you think about, and everyone always thinks about flying, and it's so rich and everyone is so uptight, and I assure you it's not. Usually,
They think of the Kennedys.
Yeah.
Right.
Usually it's your neighbor that you never knew. It's kind of like the airport being a little bit hidden there. It's your neighbor. Oh, you got a pilot? You go fly it on the week? No kidding, and it's some guy who maybe owns a local small business or works in an insurance company or something like that. And it's because it opens up just a huge world of freedom. Like from Simsbury Airport, it's 45 minutes in a Cessna to Block Island. It's just a little bit longer than that to Martha's Vineyard. You want to get up to Boston? The heck with the Mass Turnpike up there in a little more than an hour. Off to Cape Cod, about an hour and 5 minutes or so. You can get down to Montauk, right on the end of Long Island. That's about 35, 40 minutes or so.
And I can tell you it's a
Yep.
good way to impress a date
Yes.
because my,
Yes.
my son-in-law took my daughter on a first date. I think it was to Nantucket. On he rented a
Right.
plane.
Right.
And I'll tell
Yeah.
you, she was impressed.
Yes, yes, it is. Yeah, it is. It does compress your travel time quite a bit. Last week, I went on a training flight with one of my students. We went from Simsbury to Albany. Then we went from Albany to Nashua, New Hampshire, from Nashua, New Hampshire to Hartford, and back to Simsbury, in about 4.5 hours of flying time. You just can't imagine the drive time.
So how much
would
does
have
that
taken.
cost, though?
Well, I mean, it depends. So, if you have your own aircraft, it'll vary just greatly because you have some aircraft which are, I mean, some of the aircraft that operate out of Simsbury, they're what you call twin-engine aircraft, and they can use quite a bit of fuel, and avgas is 100 octane, so naturally it's much more expensive than regular gasoline. So you can burn through quite a bit of fuel that way, but sometimes you've got some quite efficient planes, and it sounds like a lot until you start doing the math. So let me just throw this out at you. Probably I can rent a plane anywhere 130, 140 bucks an hour with fuel included. So it takes me about 40 minutes to get out to Block Island, 40 minutes back. There's about an hour and 20 minutes, hour and a half, let's say. So I'm talking maybe 210, 230 bucks, something like that. But if it's just me, that's a little bit expensive. But you also have to imagine there's another 3 seats in that plane. If I bring me and a couple friends out there, and you're allowed under FAA rules to divide the cost of the flight equally among people. Like they couldn't pay, because I don't have a commercial license, they couldn't pay me for the flight, but we can divide the cost of the flight. So then you're talking, wait, it's 75 bucks to get out to Block Island and back in 40 minutes and avoid the ferry and avoid the traffic and avoid the rest of that and avoid the wear and tear in my car. All of a sudden, that sounds like a pretty good option. If I were to fly from here to California, nah. It's much easier just to take a commercial flight. But if I'm going around the region or something like that, taking a small plane is kind of the best way to go and often the cheapest.
Right. And also, too, you have thousands of airports that are available to you. When you fly the airlines, there's about 250 airports, I think, that are served. So you can fly into many places, and there's a small airport. I had a business appointment in Cumberland, Maryland. Now, to get to Cumberland, Maryland, you have to fly to Philadelphia, then you fly to Pittsburgh, then you rent the car, and then you drive, or you drive 11 hours from Connecticut. We flew it in just under 2 hours. We did our business, and we flew home in time for supper.
It suddenly gets you back not only that time, but that level of frustration. Plus, I'll tell you what, even if it got me as fast driving on like I-91 or 95 or something like that and flying, I take flying every time. Because you know what? I don't have to deal with people cutting me off or honking their horns or missing the exit or the tire pressure light. Why is the tire pressure light on?
Okay, so now let me turn to something a little more serious. When you're teaching people to fly, and then we had this young pilot learn to fly, and something went terribly wrong in his brain or something. Have you ever had a student where you said, I don't think that flying is for you? Have you seen that?
I have had one or two, and it was more their commitment than it was their ability. It does take commitment. It is much more complicated than driving your car. The weather is a big factor. And like any hand-eye coordination sport, if you would, it requires practice. And there are some people that don't have the proper mindset, and they kind of think it's like they hop into their SUV and they blast down the highway, and there's more to it than that. So here at Future Flyers, I don't think we've had somebody come in that's had that, because our candidates, pilot candidates here, are much more in love with it. And it is somewhat self-calling too, because some people get in and they like to fly, but they say, that's not for me. And they go away. and then you see them hanging around the airport, right, Brad?
Yeah.
and or they're helping at the fly-in, and it's because they make the decision maybe because there are other things in their life that get in the way.
So to touch on the issue of this plane crash again,
Yes.
briefly, I know that pilots are, especially commercial pilots, this is their living.
Right.
They do not want to lose their license. And so, for instance, this young man, I mean, he didn't want anybody to know
Right.
that he wasn't well.
Right.
And it's this whole self-reporting thing.
Right.
Do you have an opinion about that? I mean, some people are saying they should do what doctors do, which is...
Well, it's one of those things. Self-reporting is one thing, but they do go, like, in order to fly as an airline transport pilot or have your ATP license, maintain that. I believe it's under 35 or 40 years old. You have to get a medical once a year, and they go through everything. And part of that is a psychiatric evaluation.
Right.
As part of that. Once you get above a certain age, just because of the potential of heart conditions and all that, it's every 6 months. So it's not like, he hasn't seen, a doctor and so often. And as they're starting to see now is that part of the issue was not that the airline was not aware of it was that they didn't act on it properly. Right. So, I think it's in that it was seen and that it was reported was good, but clearly there was a failing somewhere amongst the airline itself where they didn't make the proper decision to evaluate that pilot further based on the evidence, and they should have.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good appraisal, Brad, because most pilots are very can-do. They're kind of like firefighters and doctors, people that are task-oriented. We're going to do it. And they also are very aware of kind of self-policing. If there is somebody in the organization, especially if you start flying for hire, word gets out real quick that this guy's a bozo or a hotshot or something else, and then that's what chief pilots and line pilots are for. I think when this investigation is over, which will probably take a year or more, you're going to find that there were a lot of red flags that were missed, and there were some holes in the system that will be plugged. This is such an anomaly. Worldwide, suicide by airplane is very rare, and usually it's smaller airplanes, and by airliner, it's almost unheard of.
This was more than suicide. This was murder.
It was
Oh,
murder.
absolutely.
Yes,
And
yes.
I have refused to mention his name, and I wish more people would mention the pilot's name who was there.
Right.
Patrick Sondenheimer, I think his
Right.
name was.
Right.
He
Yeah.
was the hero.
It's every pilot's nightmare.
Right.
Because we are in control people. We are in control of. In order to be a pilot, you have to be not only in control, but you have to be in control of your emotions, and you have to be in control of yourself. And so for something like that to happen is it's just it's such an anomaly.
Right.
It's a tragedy, but it is an anomaly.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to stop us here.
Okay.
Our time is up already. It
dear.
went very quickly. I want to thank everyone here at SCTV behind the scenes for getting the show on the air. Thanks especially to my guests, Brad Griswold and Leah LaBeouf. It's been such a pleasure
Thank you.
to learn
Thank you.
so much about the airport and learning to fly. And finally, thank you for joining us. If you missed any portion of the show, you can find it on our website at simsburytv.org. I'm Dominique Avery. See you next time to talk about the Talcott Mountain Music Festival on the Talk of Simsbury.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.